As the WNBA have done it. They have done it. They have officially fined Sophie Cunningham every podcast episode.
What if every time you spoke your mind, you got punished? Not for breaking the rules, not for throwing punches, but just for talking. Sounds ridiculous, right? Well, that's exactly what's happening inside the WNBA, and one player has turned it into the most unexpected business model you've ever seen. Instead of silencing her, the league's punishments are making her bigger, louder, and more famous by the day. The question isn't whether she's breaking rules, it's whether the league even realizes they're the ones building her brand for her.
I'm officially 3 for 3 on being fined by the WNBA.
Holy sh! For this? For the pod? Again?
They didn't like my comments on Paige Becker's.
No way!
I didn't even say anything bad.
Sophie Cunningham isn't exactly the type of player you'd expect to become the WNBA's lightning rod. She wasn't a household name, she wasn't headlining commercials, and she wasn't the league's golden child. But all of that changed the moment the fines started rolling in. Not for fights, not for technicals, not even for controversial plays on the court, but for speaking. Podcasts, interviews, TikToks, you name it. Every time Sophie opened her mouth, the league seemed to reach for her wallet. And here's the wild part. What was supposed to be a punishment only turned her into a bigger star.
I love Paige to death. Do not get me wrong. I think, I think she's a hell of a player and, would love to play with her one day. But those refs were giving her every freaking whistle last night. You literally couldn't touch her. And that shit is so...
The first time the WNBA fined her, fans expected her to be embarrassed, maybe even silenced. Instead, she leaned into it. She laughed about it, posted online, and suddenly people who had never even watched a game were Googling her name. Overnight, the problem child label wasn't a scarlet letter, it was a spotlight. From that moment on, every fine became a headline, every headline became a viral clip, and every viral clip pulled Sophie further into the center of the conversation. The league wanted to control her, but all they did was fuel the spark that lit her rise. It all started with what seemed like a minor slap on the wrist. Sophie Cunningham's very first fine was just a few $100s, barely enough to dent a professional athlete's paycheck.
We were talking about, our first week, what people had to say. Well, the WNBA fined me for talking about the refs.
No!
Everyone's like, what is going on with the refs? And I'm like, I don't know. And you finding me $500 is not going to do shit.
You got fined for episode 1?
Dude, they fined me $1,500. I'm like, what? I'm like, this is just the beginning. It's like, you're kidding.
Oh, way. It's cool for the pod, but that's kind of a bummer. Do they put this is why you're being fined and this is why it's this much? Or is it hey, quit talking shit on us, Venmo us $1,500?
No. What happens is they email our GM. She pulls me aside and she goes, come here, Soph, I have to talk to you. And this was in front of everybody. And I was like, what did I do now? And she just smiled and she goes, hey, they're going to fine you again. I was like, I even told them, I even credited them that their job was hard. I'm not saying that your job is easy. I did say that. And I said that I would not be good at it. Look at the whole picture. What are we doing? Ugh. And then I'll get fined for that. And then I'll get fined for this.
The league expected her to take the loss quietly, learn her lesson, and move on. But what happened next flipped that entire plan upside down. Almost immediately, her jersey sold out. Fans who barely knew her name were suddenly repping her number. Her TikTok following didn't just grow, it exploded, jumping by the hundreds of thousands in a matter of weeks. Brands started to notice, sponsorships rolled in, and Sophie went from being just another player to one of the most talked about names in women's basketball. That first $400 fine turned out to be the best marketing investment Sophie could have ever made. She didn't buy ads, she didn't need flashy promos, the league did all the work for her. And the irony couldn't be sharper, the punishment that was supposed to shut her down ended up being the launchpad that changed her career. But as it turned out, that was only the beginning. One fine might have been brushed off as a fluke. A funny coincidence. But then it happened again. And again. Before long, Sophie was the first to admit it herself. I'm officially 3 for 3 on being fined by the WNBA. And instead of being upset, she laughed about it. Why? Because by then, she understood the game better than anyone else. Every fine didn't take money out of her pocket, it put her name back in the headlines.
are not protecting their players. Nobody's going to watch this if you're not protecting your star player. You're not protecting your players, period. But particularly your star players. No one's going to watch this. People are watching it because of Caitlin Clark, and then even more because of Sophie Cunningham. And if you're going to just hang them out to dry, then, good heavens. And then what? Reese is out. Angel Reese is out too. Is she coming back to WNBA? That's a big question. Nobody's going to watch this anymore because they don't protect their players. It's a worthless organization. They have no idea how to protect their players. But, oh man, they're going to bitch and moan. Well, you better pay us the money. For what? You can't even protect your star players that draw the eyeballs. Now nobody's watching. Nobody's going to watch to see the star players sitting out with injuries because of poor treatment and poor officiating on the sides. Nobody's going to watch that. That's so dumb. I hate it because, man, they had a hot streak. And now look.
Her podcast episodes drew more listeners. Her TikToks went viral. Her brand deals stacked higher. What the league thought was discipline had actually become free advertising. It was the Streisand effect in full force. The harder they tried to silence her, the louder her voice became. And the craziest part? The things she was being fined for weren't even scandals. One of her offenses was as harmless as complimenting Paige Bucher's ability to draw fouls. Not trash talk, not profanity, not an insult, a compliment. That's what the WNBA decided was worth hundreds of dollars in punishment. Meanwhile, other players and coaches have said far harsher things about officiating without ever reaching for their checkbook. Which raised a bigger question. Was this really about protecting the game, or was Sophie Cunningham being singled out? But the deeper you look, the more obvious it gets. If Sophie's fines were truly about protecting the game, then you'd expect the rules to be consistent. But the reality couldn't be more different. Angel Reese has walked into a post-game press conference and openly called Caitlin Clark's whistle special. No fine. Not a dime. Kelsey Plum has stopped entire presses just to unload on officiating. Again, no fine. Stephanie White, a head coach, has exploded on the sidelines after seeing one of her players nearly bodyslam Clark, and guess what? Still no fine. So why is Sophie Cunningham treated differently? How does praising Paige Bucher's ability to draw fouls suddenly cross some invisible line, while others can shout at referees with zero consequences? Fans aren't buying the league's excuses. To them, it looks less like discipline and more like favoritism. A double standard hiding behind the mask of professionalism. And here's the part that's impossible to ignore: Sophie isn't just being punished. She's being targeted. Because every time someone else gets away with calling out officiating, it makes Sophie's situation look even more ridiculous. The punishment isn't about protecting the game. It's about protecting certain players. And if there's one player who seems more protected than anyone else, it's Paige Bucher's. Paige Bucher's isn't just a star, she's become untouchable. For the league, she's a marketing dream, young, talented, and surrounded by one of the most vocal fan bases in women's basketball. But with that protection comes controversy, because the treatment she gets compared to Sophie Cunningham couldn't be more different. Fans have pointed out moments where Paige shoved Sophie twice in a single game and somehow Sophie ended up whistled for the fouls. Imagine that. Paige makes contact, whistle blows, foul on Sophie. To casual fans, it looks like sloppy officiating. To diehard followers, it feels like favoritism in plain sight. And Paige's fanbase only fuels the fire. They defend her at all costs, swarm social media with attacks on anyone who criticizes her, and in some cases, even celebrate Sophie's injuries. That kind of blind loyalty turns every Sophie comment into a powder keg. The league knows this, and instead of stepping in to keep things fair, they seem to lean into it, shielding Paige while punishing Sophie. For Sophie, that double standard has become both her curse and her greatest weapon. Because every time the league tries to knock her down in defense of Paige, Sophie turns it into another viral moment. But she's not the only player caught in this mess. Because right in the middle of all this chaos is Caitlin Clark, the biggest star the WNBA has ever seen, and somehow, the one who gets treated the worst. If Sophie Cunningham has become the WNBA's rebel, then Caitlin Clark is its reluctant savior. She's the reason arenas are packed, the reason ESPN highlights women's basketball every night, and the reason ratings are at record highs. Quite literally, Caitlin Clark is the player who dragged the WNBA into mainstream relevance. But instead of being celebrated and protected, she's been thrown into a storm of questionable officiating and outright hostility. Night after night, Caitlin takes elbows, shoves, scratches, even an eye poke that left her staggering off the court only to somehow be called for a foul herself. Fans can't believe what they're seeing. The player who single-handedly boosted the league's popularity is the same one absorbing the worst treatment. And when she finally reacts, that's when the whistle comes. Caitlin can take hit after hit without a word, but the second she raises an eyebrow at an official, boom, technical foul. Meanwhile, Paige Buchers can throw her hands up in frustration, jaw at referees all game long, and skate away untouched. The contrast is impossible to ignore. It's why so many fans believe Caitlin isn't just battling opponents, she's battling the system. And caught between Paige's protection and Sophie's punishment, she's stuck in the middle of a league that doesn't seem to know how to handle its own stars. But the real problem isn't just the officiating, it's how the league and the media handle the fallout. When controversies like this erupt, you'd expect the media to ask the tough questions. Why is Sophie Cunningham fined for compliments while others skate free? Why does Caitlin Clark take more punishment than protection? Why does Paige Buchers seem untouchable? These are the questions fans want answered, but too often, reporters act less like journalists and more like PR staff. Instead of pressing the league, they laugh off the controversies. Instead of digging into officiating inconsistencies, they downplay the problems as just part of the game. And instead of holding the WNBA accountable, they frame the issues as if fans are overreacting. But here's the truth, fans aren't stupid. They see the double standards. They see the cover-ups. And they know when they're being sold a polished version of reality. That's why independent voices have exploded in popularity. Fans are turning to podcasts, TikTok creators, and YouTube channels for coverage, because at least they're saying what everyone else is thinking. The credibility gap is widening, and the league is paying the price. Every time the media avoids the hard questions, the spotlight on Sophie and Caitlin gets brighter, and the WNBA looks weaker. And that's what sets up the biggest twist of all. Sophie Cunningham, the player the league is trying to silence, has figured out how to turn every so-called punishment into her own personal victory. By now, it's clear that Sophie Cunningham isn't losing this battle, she's winning it. What the league thought would be a silencing tactic has become her playbook for success. Every fine, every headline, every controversy is fuel for her brand. Instead of shrinking, she's building an empire out of the very punishments meant to shut her down. Think about it, a few $100s leaves her bank account, and in exchange she gets millions of impressions online. Viral TikToks, trending podcast clips, sponsorships lining up at her door. While the WNBA hands out penalties, Sophie turns them into marketing opportunities that money alone couldn't buy. She doesn't need flashy billboards or paid ads, the league itself is doing her advertising for free. And she knows it. That's why she laughs when the fines come in, why she brushes them off like loose change. For Sophie, every punishment is proof that her strategy is working. She's flipped the system on its head, turning league discipline into a business model. So while the WNBA thinks it's keeping her in check, all it's really doing is cutting her a check. At the end of the day, Sophie Cunningham has done something almost no athlete manages to pull off, she's turned punishment into profit. Every fine meant to silence her has only made her louder. Every attempt to paint her as the problem child has only elevated her status as the league's most marketable rebel. Instead of shrinking under the spotlight, she's learned how to own it and flip the script on the very people trying to control her. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark stands at the center of the storm, the league's biggest attraction and its most vulnerable target. She's the reason ratings are soaring, yet she takes the brunt of the league's inconsistent officiating. And Paige Buchers. She remains the untouchable golden child, shielded from criticism, protected at all costs, and backed by a fanbase that fuels the fire every time her name is mentioned. It all leaves one undeniable truth: the WNBA has no idea how to balance its stars. They punish the wrong players, protect the wrong ones, and in the process, they create a credibility crisis that fans can't ignore. Sophie turns their discipline into headlines, Caitlin endures abuse that should never happen, and Paige gets treatment no one else could dream of. The league thinks it's in control, but right now, It looks like the players are running the show and Sophie Cunningham might just be the smartest one of them all.